The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical Psychology for Today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, voiced by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. In this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from Wisdom of the Idiots by Idries Shah. This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation. The Treasure of the Custodians. A prince of the illustrious House of Abbas, kinsfolk of the Prophet's uncle, was living a humble life in Mosul of Iraq. His family had fallen upon evil times and had reverted to the common lot of man to labour. After 3 generations, the family was somewhat restored, and the prince had the status of a small shopkeeper. As is the custom with the noble among the Arabs, this man, whose name was Daud al-Abbasi, merely called himself Daud, son of Altaf. He spent his days in the marketplace, selling beans and herbs, trying to repair the family's fortunes. This process continued for some years, until Daud fell in love with the daughter of a rich merchant, Zubaydah ibnat Tawil. She was more than willing to marry him, but there was a custom in her family that any prospective son-in-law would have to match a rare gem specially selected by the father, in order to prove his resourcefulness and also his material worth. After the preliminary negotiations, when Daud was shown the glittering ruby which Tawil had chosen for the test to win his daughter, the young shopkeeper's heart became heavy. Not only was this gem of the finest water, but its size and colour were such that the mines of Badakhshan could surely never have yielded anything of that kind more than once in 1,000 years. Time passed, and Daud thought of every means he could to find the money which he would need to even try to match the jewel. He at length discovered from a jeweller that he had but one chance. If he sent out criers to offer anyone producing its equal not only his house and all his possessions, but also 3/4 of every penny which he would earn for the rest of his natural life, there might be a chance to find a similar ruby. Accordingly, Daud caused this announcement to be made. Day after day the word went forth that a ruby of astonishing value, brilliance, and colour was being sought, and people from far and near hastened to the house of the merchant to see whether they could provide anything so magnificent. But after a lapse of almost 3 years, Daud found that there was no ruby in Arabistan or Ajam, in Khorasan or Hind, in Africa or the West, in Java or Ceylon, which came anything near the excellence of the one which his prospective father-in-law had found. Zubaydah and Daud were at the point of despair. It seemed as though they were never to marry, for the girl's father refused adamantly to accept anything less than a perfect match for his ruby. One evening, when Daud was sitting in his small garden trying to think for the 1,000th time of some means to win Zubaydah, he realized that a tall and emaciated figure was standing beside him. In his hand he had a staff, on his head was a dervish cap, slung at his waist was a metal begging bowl. "Peace upon you, O my king," said Daud in the customary salutation, rising to his feet. "Daud, the Abbasi, scion of the House of Quraysh," said the apparition. "I am one of the guardians of the treasures of the Apostle, and I have come to help you in your extremity. You seek a matchless ruby. I shall give it to you from the treasures of your patrimony, left safe in the hands of the penniless custodians." Daud looked at him and said, "All the treasure which was in the possession of our house was spent, sold, plundered centuries ago. We have nothing left but our name, and we do not even use that for fear of dishonouring it. How can there be any treasure left out of my patrimony?" "There can still be treasure, precisely because it was not all left in the hands of the house," said the dervish. "For people always first rob those who are known to have something to steal. When, however, that is gone, thieves do not then know where to look. This is the first measure of security of the custodians." Daoud reflected that many dervishes are reputed to be eccentrics, and so he only said, "Who would leave priceless treasures such as a gem like Tawil's in the hands of a ragged beggar? And what tattered beggar, having been given even one such thing, would forbear from throwing it away, or selling it and spending the proceeds in an insane bout of recklessness?" The dervish answered, "My son, this is exactly what people are expected to think. Because beggars are ragged, people imagine that they desire clothes. Because a man has a jewel, people imagine that he will throw it away if he is not a thrifty merchant. Your thoughts are the things which help to make our treasure secure." "Then take me to the treasure," said Daoud, "so that I may end my intolerable doubts and fears." The dervish blindfolded Daoud and made him ride, dressed as a blind man, for several days and nights on a mean donkey. They dismounted and walked through a mountain cleft, and when the cloth was removed from his eyes, Daoud saw that he was standing in a treasure house where incalculable quantities and unbelievable varieties of precious stones glittered from shelves in serried walls of stone. "Can this be the treasure of my forefathers? Because I have never so much as heard of anything like it, even from the time of Harun al-Rashid," said Daoud. "You may be sure that it is," said the dervish, "and more than that. This is only the cavern which contains the jewels from which you may choose. There is much more." "And is it mine?" "It is yours." "Then I will take it all," said Daoud, who was almost overcome by greed at the sight. "You will take just what you have come here to take," said the dervish, "for you are as little fitted for the proper administration of this wealth as were your forebears. If this were not so, the custodians would have handed back the entire treasure centuries ago." Daoud chose the only ruby which exactly matched Tawil's, and the dervish bore him back to his house in the same way as he had brought him. Daoud and Zubaydah were married. And in this way, it is related, the treasures of the house are handed out to their proper inheritors whenever they have real need for them. Today the custodians are not always patched dervishes in appearance. Sometimes they are to all outward appearances the most ordinary of men, but they will not yield the treasures, except when there is a real need. The attachment called grace. A studious and dedicated seeker after truth arrived at the tekia of Bahauddin Naqshband. In accordance with custom, he attended the lectures and asked no questions. When Bahauddin at last said to him, "Ask something of me," this man said, "Shah, before I came to you I studied such and such a philosophy under so-and-so. Attracted by your repute, I journeyed to your tekia. Hearing your addresses, I have been impressed by what you are saying and wish to continue my studies with you. But since I have such gratitude and attachment to my former studies and teacher, I would like you either to explain their connection with your work, or else to make me forget them, so that I may continue without a divided mind." Bahauddin said, "I can do neither of these things. What I can do, however, is to inform you that one of the surest signs of human vanity is to be attached to a person and to a creed, and to imagine that such attachment comes from a higher source. If a man becomes obsessed by sweetmeats, he would call them divine if anyone would allow it. With this information you can learn wisdom. Without it you can only learn attachment and call it grace. The man who needs malumat, information, always supposes that he needs marifat, wisdom. If he is really even a man of information, he will see that he next needs wisdom. If he is a man of wisdom, he only then is free from the need for information. Correction. Abdullah ben Yahya was showing a manuscript which he had written to a visitor. This man said, "But this word has been incorrectly spelt." He at once deleted the word and wrote it in the manner of which his guest approved. When the man had left, Abdullah was asked, "Why did you do that, considering that the correction was in fact inaccurate, and you wrote the wrong word where the original one had been right?" He answered, "That was a social occasion. The man thought he was helping me and thought that the expression of his ignorance was an indication of knowledge. I applied the behavior of culture and politeness, not the behavior of truth, because when people want politeness and social interchange, they cannot stand truth. Had I stood in relation to this man as teacher to student, matters would have been different. Only stupid people and pedants imagine that their duty is to instruct everyone, when the motive of the people is generally not to seek instruction, but to attract attention. The Saint and the Sinner. There was once a dervish devotee who believed that it was his task to reproach those who did evil things, and to enjoin them upon spiritual thoughts, so that they might find the right path. What this dervish did not know, however, was that a teacher is not only one who tells others to do things by acting through fixed principles. Unless the teacher knows exactly what the inner situation is with each student, the teacher may suffer the reverse of what he desires. However, this devotee one day found a man who gambled excessively and did not know how to cure the habit. The dervish took up his position outside the man's house. Every time he left for the gambling house, the dervish placed a stone to mark each sin upon a pile which he was accumulating as a visible reminder of evil. Each time the other man went out, he felt guilty. Each time he came back, he saw another stone on the pile. Each time he put a stone on the pile, the devotee felt anger at the gambler and personal pleasure, which he called godliness, in having recorded his sin. This process continued for 20 years. Each time the gambler saw the devotee, he said to himself, "Would that I understood goodness, how that saintly man works for my redemption. Would that I could repent, let alone become like him, for he is sure of a place among the elect when the time of requital arrives." It so happened that through a natural catastrophe, both men died at the same time. An angel came to take the soul of the gambler and said to him gently, "You are to come with me to paradise." "But," said the gambler, "how can that be? I am a sinner and must go to hell. Surely you are looking for the devotee who sat opposite my house, who has tried to reform me for 2 decades. "The devotee," said the angel. "No. He is being taken to the lower regions, since he has to be roasted upon a spit." "What justice is this?" shouted the gambler, forgetting his situation. "You must have got the instructions reversed." "Not so," said the angel, "as I shall explain to you. It is thus wise. The devotee has been indulging himself for 20 years with feelings of superiority and merit. Now it is his turn to redress the balance. He really put those stones on the pile for himself, not for you." "And what about my reward? What have I earned?" asked the gambler. "You are to be rewarded because every time you passed the dervish, you thought first of goodness and secondly of the dervish. It is goodness, not man, which is rewarding you for your fidelity." This podcast is copyright 2016, the Idries Shah Foundation.